Kia ora te whānau, e ihu karate ko, Andrew Doubleday aho. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 11th of January 2026. It's Matthew chapter 3 verses 13 through to 17. It's short and it gives Matthew's account on the baptism of Jesus. Jesus came from Galilee to John at the Jordan to be baptized by him. John would have prevented him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" But Jesus answered him, "Let it be so now, for it is proper for us in this way to fulfill all righteousness." Then he consented. And when Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened to him, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." Oh, there's much that we could say about this wonderful little story. But I'm just going to keep it really quite narrow. By the time you're watching this, or by the time it's made live, the new year will have come and gone, and we'll be now into 2026. We've transitioned out of the old year into the new year. And it may be that there's aspects of your life, as there are actually emerging aspects of mine, where there's an element of shift, there's an element of transition just quietly unfolding. What I can't help noticing is that we are living in a time on the world political scene, geopolitical across the planet, where there's a great deal of uncertainty. We are moving into a time of transition, and we do not know what's ahead. We do not know what the future might hold, for good or for ill. For me also, as I kind of indicated, I'm of an age where I'm unsure what happens next. I'm at a stage of life where I too am considering what the future might look like, of what might yet be ahead of me and of Lynn together. There's an element of uncertainty which, after years in very settled pastoral ministries, comes as a little bit of a surprise. And so these transition times always, I suspect, have an element of uncertainty, which can bring an element of fear, but also potentially an element of excitement. So we see John. I want to suggest that John, in this passage, in this story, in this moment, is living in a place of transition. He hasn't realized it. It has come upon him suddenly. And what we see as we trace through the various gospel accounts is that between his ministry and the ministry of Jesus, there is a relatively small overlap. Probably something around 6 weeks in all. We've got the baptism in the story we've just read. In the accounts, Jesus then goes immediately into the desert. We don't see this in John's account, but we see it in the synoptics. And he's there for the 40 days. And then he comes back, and there's a few days of overlap, as we'll see next week, with Jesus' ministry. And so for John, all that John has been talking about, all that John has had his life focused on him, has suddenly come to fruition, in a sense. Out of nowhere, Jesus suddenly appears, is baptized by John, and then immediately disappears again. But for John, this is, I want to suggest, a watershed moment. He has been preparing this for all his life, and suddenly it's there, it's upon him, and he's faced with the reality that his role may be coming to an end, and quite quickly. John must have had the sense that the clock has started to run down. He was sent, as he knows and as he continues to proclaim, as a forerunner, as the voice in the desert proclaiming the coming of the Messiah. And suddenly, unexpectedly, with no warning, bing, there he is, right in front of him, asking to be baptized. And John is under no doubt that this person is the one. He's seen the sign that he was promised. He recognizes him as his cousin, and he may not have actually ever met him up until this point. But he recognizes that he has now just baptized his successor in ministry. So what happens next for John? As I said, the clock is running down. Does this frighten him or liberate him? Does this fill him with such a sense of uncertainty that he's really quite bothered by where he is? Or does it in fact set him free to be someone else? Now that he's identified and baptized Jesus, does this allow him potentially to practice some or pursue some passion projects that he might have? The reality is that his prophetic call has been to call out evil where he sees it. And it's not long after this that we see that he's arrested for criticizing the king, Herod Antipas, and criticizing his domestic living arrangements. My wonder is, had he been doing this earlier? But because he's wanting to be sure that he can clearly identify the Messiah, he's not providing opportunity for himself to be swept up in some sort of scheme to get him out of the way. We don't know. We don't know. And you might ask, well, why would this make a difference? Well, this could be purely projection on my part. I know that in my roles in the church over a number of decades, there are places, in terms of things that I think and feel and believe about politics, about theology, about personal positions on things, that I just don't tend to talk about publicly. Because I know that there will be a proportion of people that will be cheering me on, and other group of people who I've been appointed to care for and to lead, who would find some of the things that I held to as being potentially quite problematic. And that would often be among the more vulnerable parts, as I would see it, of my constituency. So I just don't go there. It is just not fair, it is not worth it, so I don't. And when my current role ends, the one that I'm in at the moment, I don't know how long this will run for, and if there isn't another one to follow this, will it give me a greater sense of freedom? Will I find myself producing video talks on a whole lot of other subjects that I haven't ventured into? A whole lot of things that I think are important that I'd really love to talk about, but I think given my current role, it's just less than useful. You hear what I'm asking? Would it give me a greater sense of freedom? Now I'm left wondering how much of a sense of freedom coming to the end of his current role this gives John. Or does it leave him with a measure of anxiety? Does it leave him with the questions, what does this mean for me? Is my job actually complete? After 30 years of preparing for this, and now it's happened, what do I do now? What happens next? Up until now, his life has been singularly focused. It's all been about one thing. He was born for this. And he takes the role and the task like a duck to water, and he takes it very seriously. He dresses for the part. Even his diet reflects a certain flair for the dramatic. But what happens next? Is he allowed to reinvent himself? Does he have it in him? Can he now just become John, the son of Zechariah and Elizabeth, who are both long dead? Can he get an everyday job as a beekeeper or a guide for the desert? Or can he just happily settle into a labouring job? After all, he's only in his early 30s and he's potentially got plenty of life left in him. Except we know that there isn't. Within months he's been executed by Herod, and it's over. I can only wonder what might yet have been. Yet, in the end, he did what he was called to. And surely for John, that was more than enough. Faithful to the end. And maybe that's true for every one of us. Doing what we're called to, faithful in the ordinary, in the everyday. It doesn't have to be dramatic like John the Baptist, but just being faithful to the call of God upon each of our lives, and caring for those around us, and supporting and loving and blessing those around us. And perhaps for John, he might have loved to have heard the epithet over his life that was spoken over David's, Israel's most beloved king. In Acts chapter 13, we read it say that when he had served God's purpose in his generation, he fell asleep. I kinda wonder what could be better than that. Amen. God bless you.